Hello students, in this session we will see branching control structures. In that we will see nested if else if and few examples. Learning objectives are, here we will learn what is branching statements, and we will also learn what and how to use nested if statement. Similarly, we will learn what and how to use if else if statements. Session outcome: by using the knowledge of operators, branching and IO statements, we should be able to write C programs to solve different problems. The prerequisite is that you should have learned first unit and IO statements in C programming language. So let us get into nested if. When an if else statement is present inside the body of another if or else, then this is called as nested if else. And there is no limit on how deeply the ifs and elses can be nested. Using this flowchart, you should be able to understand it clearly. This is condition 1 would be your if else statement. There is a if statement here. If this condition turns out to be true, then it will get to the if block. Within that if block, there is another if else statement. If that inner if block turns out to be true, then it will execute this statement and it will come out. If the inner if is not true, that means it's false, then there could be an else block and it will enter that block and it will execute statement 2 and then come out of the loop. The outer if statement, if that condition is false, so it will enter the else block of the outer if loop, outer if statement, then it will execute statement 3 and then it will come out. So let us see in terms of code how it looks. So this is how it should look. Like there is a if statement and there is a condition. If this condition turns out to be true, then it will come inside this if block, and within that there is another if else block. If condition 2 is true, then it will enter inside this. If this condition 2 is not true, then it will enter the else block of the inner if else. Right? So what we have done here is that inside the if block of the outer if, we have another if else block. So this inner if else block is there in the another if block. Similarly, this is for this else is for this if block, outer if block. So if this is not true, then it will come here and it will execute this outer else block. Hope this is clear. Let us see an example of the nested if else. So here we have included the library and there is a main method. Here we have declared two variables, var1 and var2, and we are asking the user to enter the value of var1, and we are taking in using the scanf statements in the var1 variable, and we are similarly taking the value from the user in the var2, and then in this if statement we are trying to compare var1 and var2. If both are not equal, then it enter the if block, and we are printing anyway var1 is not equal to var2, and inside this we have a nested if else statement. This nested if else statement is there in this outer if statement. So here we are comparing the value of var1 and var2. If var1 is greater than var2, it means that the var1 is greater than the var2, else the var2 is greater than the var1, and this outer if block is closed here, and there is a else block for this outer if, and if var1 equals var2, then this statement won't be true, so it will come here and display var1 is equal to var2. Then we are returning 0, and this will be sample output. If the user enters 12 and then 21, then var1 is not equal to var2 will display, as both are not equal, 12 and 21 are not equal. Then it will come here and it will execute this one, wherein it will say var2 is greater than the var1. So now let us see another conditional statement called as else if statement or else if ladder. We can call both a name, else if statement or else if ladder. And this is useful when we need to check multiple conditions within the program. We'll see what that means in a moment. Nesting of if-else blocks can be avoided using the else if statement, because as I said in the nested if-else, we can nest to any depth, but that becomes complexity and the other developer won't be able to easily understand what you've written. So if you use instead of that, if there are too many conditions and you need to select one of them, then you can very well use else if statement or ladder statements. Because of this, the other developers would be able to easily understand your code because of its simplicity. So let us see how the else if or else if ladder statement works. If in the first if condition, the condition 1 is true, it will enter this if block and it will execute one statement and it will come out of the block. If the first if is not true, means it's false, then it will go to the next else if block. That else if block, there's once again a condition, and in that else if block, if the condition is true, then it will enter that block and it will execute a statement and come out. If that is also not true, means if that is also false, then it will go to the next else if. In this next else if, the condition is true, it will enter that block and execute some statement and come out. If that also is false, then it will go to the next else if block. So on and so forth. You can go to any depth. Then at the end of it, if the last else if block, if the condition is false, then it will go to the last else block and execute a default statement and come out. We'll see the code in a moment. Yes, let's see the syntax. Here, if the condition 1 is true, it will come here and execute this and go out of this complete control block. If at all, if this first if condition 1 is false, then it will come to the next else if block. And here, if this condition 2 is true, it will enter here and it will execute the whatever statements that are there in this block and then come out of the complete the control block. If this condition 2 is also false, then it will come here. Here, if the condition 3 is false once again, then it will come to the next else if block. It will go on like this. Only if the condition that is there in the else if is false, then only it will go to the next else if and check. If that condition becomes true, then it will enter into the block and execute that and it will come out of the complete control code block. If at last, if any else if block is not true, then it will come to the last else block and it will execute that statement which are default statements, and it will come out of the whole control block. So let us see an example on this. Whatever the last program that we have done, similar thing we will write using a else if statement or else if ladder. Here we have included a library and then main program. So for that main method, and then you are declaring two variables as explained in the last program. The user will be entering a var1 value, similarly var2 value, and in this first if we are checking the value of both of them. If var1 and var2 are different, then it will be true and enter here, and it will display var1 is not equal to var2. If this is false, var1 is not equal to var2, then it will enter here in the next else if block. It will check var1 is greater than var2. If var1 is greater than var2, display var1 is greater than var2. And if this condition is false, var1 is not equal to var2, then it will come here the second else if statement, and here var2 is greater than var1. It will check that. If this is true, then it will display var2 is greater than the var1. If nothing of these statements are true, then it will come to the last else block here, like there is no condition. So if none of these else if didn't work, then it will anyway execute this else block, and it will display var1 is equal to var2, and then it will return back. So just a recap, in this session we have studied nesting of if else blocks and also else if statement or else if ladder statement, right? So nesting of if else blocks can be done. It has no limit for depth, and else if ladder is useful when there are many conditions in the execution flow and only one need to be selected. Then most probably we'll use else if ladder, as it is easier for understanding of the code by another developer. And these are the references that we can go through. Thank you.